Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi, and welcome to Self-Improvement Atlas, the Personal Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm Marie Stella, your host from Melbourne, Australia. Let's start the show. Welcome back to the show. Having a group of friends can be really helpful in setting up a support system or even just feeling less isolated, especially if you're living alone. But today we are discussing specifically the importance of having close friends. And I'm joined by principal investigator at Michigan State University's Close Relationships Labs, Bill Chopik, to discuss the power of vulnerability in such close friendships and how it's different to a regular friendship. Hi, Bill. Lovely having you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
Doing really well. How are you?
Fine, thank you. So tell us a bit more about what the Close Relationships Labs is and what you research there.
So it is a bit like it sounds. So there's no kind of deceiving. We study how relationships and the people in them change across situations and over time. And that's all the holistic relationships in your life. So relationships with your family, relationship with your friends, relationship with your spouses. So we do this in all sorts of ways, really large longitudinal studies where we follow people in their relationships over time. And then we assess if they're happy and healthy, and maybe that had something to do with the relationships they made along the way.
That sounds really specific and very interesting. So how long have you guys been doing all this research for?
The lab has been around for the last 8 years, and we've published over 150 articles on relationships.
That's really interesting, and I am very keen to learn a bit more about close friendships. Now, before we get started, we'd like to get to know you a bit better. This is the Have You Met Bill section. Firstly, this is not a question I actually ask most of my guests, but I am curious. Does Bill stand for anything? Is it short for like a longer name?
Yeah, it's short for William.
Yeah, that's the standard answer. I feel like most Bills are Williams. I'm just kind of waiting for the situation for the day where a Bill's not a William and what that would have stood for. But unfortunately, today is not the day.
I should have surprised you by saying it's short for Larry or something.
Yeah, that would have been a surprise. Do you have a favorite book?
I like a lot of different books, actually. Trying to nail down one is a little bit difficult.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
What about your most recent favorite?
Okay. Yes, that's better. I think I'm looking at my bookshelf right now to make sure what's the most recent thing. Oh, I read a book of poetry, which I usually don't do. It's a little bit different. And it's called Everyone at This Party Has Two Names. And the author is Maudlin, a last name Maudlin.
Right.
And it's a little bit different than what I usually read. And it's kind of a series of short, mostly disconnected poems about kind of life and reflecting on, how your life has changed. It has tons of relationship references in it. So it felt a little bit like work, but mostly for fun.
So what do you like about it?
I think that I was really struck by one that I kind of saw shared on social media. And I really loved it. And I thought, hey, maybe the rest of the book is also good. So that's why I bought it. And I think that particular poem was What You Missed in the Fifth Grade. And it was kind of this weird nostalgic take of like, getting back to what your life was like in the fifth grade, and a lot of it was sort of this deep reflective kind of examination of, there's all these things that you think you missed, but in reality, it's trying to reclaim this part of people's lives when life was simpler. And I just really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really relate to that, like relating to some form of art that kind of reflects what you personally have been through. And especially when artists put it in a way where, like, they just put it in a more eloquent way than you could ever do yourself. And that's very admirable. Do you have a favorite movie?
So I'll resist the recency bias because I just saw Barbie and Oppenheimer, so I don't
Oh,
want to
which
get
one?
into.
Yeah, which one did you like more?
Uh, that's a tough question. Very political.
A bit.
But you know what? I like Barbie a little bit more because I think that I'll be able to rewatch it. Oppenheimer was a little bit more challenging, so it's rare that I want to sit down and watch a 3-hour biopic, but it was impressive for other reasons too, kind of the spectacle of it, the acting. But yeah, Barbie was a little bit lighter and more entertaining, so I think I give the slight edge to Barbie in
Yeah,
this in
fair.
this in this case. Yeah.
I personally haven't actually watched Oppenheimer yet.
Okay.
It took me like a couple of months before I actually watched Barbie, I think. But I did hear that it was a lot darker, or like a lot more serious. And I heard that a lot of people watched Oppenheimer first, mistakenly so, and then or they watched oh no, they watched Barbie first and then they watched Oppenheimer, and that was just like a mood dump.
Yeah, you'd think it would be this uplifting, light comedy, and then it
Yeah.
actually, dealt with some,
Yeah.
pretty kind of significant existential issues.
Did you watch them both in one day?
No, I don't. I can't do. I could
Yeah,
not have done that.
that's a
And
lot of
so,
watching. That's like almost 6 hours of watching.
yeah. But I think I saw Barbie first, and I don't know what that says about me, but yeah. But I like movies that make me think, and I love movies. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind might have been my real answer of, because we do some work on kind of how memories make up who we are as people and what happens when those memories change or they kind of dissipate. And, so yeah, I like movies like that
Yeah.
where it's kind of this kind of deep. There's some comedic relief. Although I like more simple movies, dumb comedies as well. So
Yeah,
I'm not.
like just as much. It's just that like sometimes these movies with like some kind of deeper meaning to it do feel a bit more fulfilling to watch. Yeah. So do you have a favorite podcast?
I do. I have a few different ones. Probably my favorite is one called "You're Wrong About."
What is it
Are you?
about?
It's really great. So it takes different things throughout history that most people only know really superficial things about. And it does a really deep dive into it, challenging kind of what you know. And
Yeah.
the hosts are really fun too. And there's a lot of comedic relief. And each episode usually starts with, so what do you know about this thing that happened in history? And then the co-host will be like, yeah, I sort of vaguely know these things, and these things. And then the other host kind of did this really deep dive, did all this background research, and basically retells a story with more complete details. And they just are really, really good at it. So I really enjoy listening to that.
Yeah, I really like stuff like that as well. I think I have been really into this YouTuber recently, not a podcast, but similar in the sense of like he does a deep dive on all of these weird things that have happened on the internet, including like viruses and stuff that you only know about because you've seen it or you've experienced it. And it's just like, oh, well, it's a scam, but there's like a deeper story to it. And it's always really interesting to see all of that unfold. Um, Especially when the host is so enthusiastic about what they're talking about. It makes it really interesting. So do you have a famous role model?
I can't say Barbie, or is that's not allowed? No.
No, it's allowed.
Oh,
If
okay.
yeah,
No.
if Barbie's your role model, who
No, I should.
who am I to who am I to reject that?
That's right. That's right. No, I should pick someone who's not a fictional character. Yeah, in the States, a few presidents are really admirable and, good people that try their best. So yeah, like Barack Obama was always somebody I kind of admired and looked up to. But as someone who's interested in personality, a lot of our time is spent witnessing people who do extraordinary things. So political leaders are one, world leaders are some, but also just people who have led extraordinary lives. So when you think of really successful people like Bill Gates or professional athletes, who kind of overcome really kind of dramatic, often things that would derail the average person, and they kind of rise to the occasion. So for one example, I grew up in Chicago, and I was a child when Michael Jordan was at his peak, and that was just he was like everything in my world. So, and then as someone who's interested in personality psychology, when a whole 10-hour documentary character study is released, I just jumped right into that. So
there are 10-hour documentary series on just character studies.
Yeah, so that was on the 1990s Chicago Bulls dynasty, but he was the focal kind of person in that. But there's stuff on baseball, the Beatles. So it sounds more boring than it is.
No, it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's like watching a soap opera, actually. So,
it just boggles my mind because it's something that's so specific. I feel like character studies, that I didn't ever, not that I've ever given it much thought, but it just never crossed my mind that something like that could warrant like a 10-hour documentary series. But that's really interesting, and I will have to look that up. So what's the last course you've completed?
The last course I've completed, I recently took a SQL course, like database management. Although I kind of love absorbing different courses, so I recently retook a social psychology course. That was the first class I took in college, and the internet is just full of like resources and including you guys offering all these kind of things that people can consume. And so I kind of fell in love with psychology again by retaking this social psychology course.
That's really nice. What was your biggest takeaway from it?
I think that there's this underappreciated thing that other people affect us, which I'm guessing we'll be talking about a lot today. So I think a lot of people go about their day-to-day lives, focusing on like what they do and assuming that they're relatively invincible to the influences of other people. And, you're kind of everything you do is like from you. When in reality, like a lot of stuff we do every day is determined by other people, like whether we want to impress them, we want them to like us or to date us, or to give us a promotion or to not fire us. Like a lot of stuff we do every day is centered around other people. So,
100%. And I find that whenever I'm in a relationship or dating someone, I find that I often absorb some of their interests. And like, sure, I might have had like a vague interest in it before, but definitely not as much as when I'm dating this person who has like an intense interest in this specific thing. So definitely,
there's entire research studies on that, how you merge with partners, how you adopt how they speak.
That's
you adopt their language.
Yeah.
I
can definitely relate to the adapting to how they speak as well. And some of my coworkers have pointed it out that sometimes I use a Kiwi accent, and it's because like I dated this one guy who was he still is Kiwi. He was from New Zealand, and I just absorbed his accent a little bit. It was just very infectious.
It's a thing. It's totally a thing. Or their mannerisms too. Or,
a little bit.
totally.
Thank God, because I like, I thought maybe that might have been a very weird thing to do, but it's nice hearing that other people do it too, and it's normal. Yeah. All right. So now we're going to move into the interview section. The first question we like to ask, because it can be pretty subjective. How do you define personal development?
Mhm. Yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, we study lifespan development in our lab, especially about relationships. So yeah, I think in terms of personal development, it might be actively taking steps to achieve some sort of lifelong goal. Um, so for a lot of those people, it might be finding a really successful job or career. Some of them, it's marriage or having children. Others are kind of finding leisure activities to do, stuff to do for fun. So in terms of, personal development, I would say, actively taking steps towards bettering yourself in some way, hopefully in light of you achieving some goal in the future.
And what do you think are the main challenges for people who are pursuing personal development?
So I mean, I've been studying psychology for, oh gosh, this will age me. 15 years, I guess.
15 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge people face is themselves. That they kind of a lot of times get in their own ways. They have kind of limiting thoughts that prevent them from fully pursuing the things that they want, or they get a lot of stuff in their head that is not the most healthy thoughts or ways of thinking. One example is that people struggle to like form friends and talk to strangers, and there's research to suggest that like they're not the weird ones. They actually like want to talk to you. It's all kind of in your head. You think that talking to this stranger will be really, really cringe or be wildly uncomfortable. But, in reality, they actually want social connection as well. But here's an example of a barrier where you have this thought in your mind that other people don't want to talk to you or strangers don't want you to bother them. So, a lot of stuff that we study in our lab has to do with people's own kind of frameworks about the world and how that prevents them from doing things that they think might make them happy.
That is really, really apt. And I think the first time I've heard the answer to this be yourself. But it's so true, because if I think back to the times when I have had like a little bit of a rut in my personal development journey, it's always been because of some form of anxiety or something like that. And I'm just stuck in my own head and just keep overthinking about how like I can't go up to this post office person because they hate me or something, or like I can't go to the doctor because like all these things, or all these people at the party just think that I'm really boring, and so there's no point trying, so I'm just gonna go home, things like that. um and and it's very, very clear, like when like try and stop ignoring the thoughts, I feel like I move on in life a bit better. um, so yeah, that's a really apt way of putting it, and I actually never thought of that before. So how would you define having close friends? What is a close friend like? Like how does it differ from a regular friend?
In terms of just general friends, a lot of it's just really simple. It's just two individuals choosing to spend time with each other. Um, and so in that case, like just having a regular friendship is really straightforward. But, I think in terms of defining it, the field has usually said something like, it's a voluntary relationship that people have. It usually provides some degree of like intimacy or assistance, like you're getting something from it.
Mhm.
And yeah, basically the only kind of elements of friendship is that people like each other and they want to hang out. And then in terms of like close friendships, that would be, say, another level where you kind of include them in how you define yourself.
Mhm.
So, like if I asked you what you're like as a person, the hope is that you would mention your friends at some point. Like, oh, I like to do this with my friends. Friendships provide us all sorts of opportunities to like define ourselves. Like, am I a compassionate person? Am I a generous person? Am I a funny person, and am I a downer? Partially how we define ourselves are through our friends. So close friendships have to do with, a level of intimacy and assistance where I think the biggest criteria is, do you feel like you can go to them when something's wrong? And that they would be responsive. So we call that perceived responsiveness. Do you kind of perceive that a friend would kind of be responsive to your time and need? So that's the critical thing that separates an acquaintance at like a coffee shop from a good friend.
So what is the importance of having close friends compared to having regular friends?
So having regular friends is good too. So, there's a whole literature suggesting that weak ties are actually really good for you. So if you wanted to say, get a job, a lot of times it's branching outside of your close friends because your close friends might not always be able to help you in that regard, but maybe
100%.
an acquaintance in another place. But in terms of personal development, there's a few different ways they can help you. One really simple way is that they give you assistance when you need it. So they can be a sounding board when things go wrong. They can cheer you up. And actually, the stress relief thing that friends give us is really, really underrated. So that's kind of a crucial reason why we hang out with friends by choice, is because they make us feel better. But beyond that, there are things that we can talk to our friends about that we maybe can't talk to our family about. And so imagine like you wanted to improve, maybe part of your personal development journey was improving things with your family or your marriage. Friends are the people we go to for advice about those things. And they give us new perspectives. The vast majority of friends have our best interest. They want to see us succeed. Again, they're hanging out with us by choice. My brother didn't do that growing up, as we were sort of in the same room. And we're friends now, thankfully. But, friends sort of have this special place in our life where, you can have as many friends as you want, but, we only have a few close friends. And the idea is that they can help us. They can make us reflect on our goals. They can maybe give us some guardrails or help us be a little bit less delusional. So a lot of times it's giving emotional support, sometimes practical support. Hey, can you help me, move? Can you help me read over this job application or this resume? So there's a bunch of different ways that friends help us to grow as people.
Yeah. And I have, so I'm going to repeat that because I just studied. I wonder, no, that's not the right word for it. My bad. Yes, I will. I'm still actually thinking of the word that I'm wanting to use because for some reason it's fallen out of my brain. So, because it's not hypothesize. Oh, I suppose that was easy. Okay. And I suppose there isn't really a framework to building relationships with close friends or trying to create close friendships or turn a regular friend into a close friend. I suppose there's no structured way to do that. But what are some like general things one can do to perhaps start building that close friendship?
So you tapped into a question that we really, really try to narrow in on as a field. And it's just been really challenging to do that. But I
can imagine. Yeah.
I'll give you what we know so far.
Yeah, thank you. I love that.
So there are some researchers who think that it's just a matter of time. So, it's a really, really interesting study where this University of Kansas professor, Jeffrey Hall, tried to quantify exactly how much time you need to spend with someone for them to become a close friend.
Wow.
So it's a little bit goofy, and he didn't mean it quite literally because, I'm sure you met people in your life that you hit it off with right away and it goes really well and you seem like fast friends. And then some people you spend tons and tons of time with that you would never think of being friends with, just by virtue you hang out with them or you need to be around them. So according to him, it kind of happens in tiers where, you can spend, say, 20 hours with people, 200 hours. He thinks you need to spend about like 2,000 hours for someone to move from, like sort of just being a
Yeah.
nice, good friend to being like an authentically close friend. But of course, it's sort of a ridiculous premise, and he admits that too. Like it's meant to kind of show you need to spend like really deep quality time and a lot of time with someone.
Right.
So that's the first thing. You literally have to spend time together. But you already knew that. But then, researchers have tried to build friendships in the lab. So they tried to do it with people who are really dissimilar and disagree with each other. So there's actually a few experiments that people try to do to make friends. And those studies have given us a few tips. So for example, one thing is that like mutual disclosure is a good thing. So if I tell you something about my life, like my role model's Barbie, you're really serious and you listen and you engage with that. You're like, oh, Barbie, why? And even if you don't quite mean it, and then I'll be like, oh, well, she's an icon and she likes her friends and she thinks deeply about life. And
Yeah, and I suppose like kind of not invalidating someone's values or like what they deem to be important to them, it would be really important to build a close friendship. Because otherwise, like, like if I just shut it down and went like, "Oh, that's so stupid," you're never gonna bring Barbie up to me ever again. You're gonna be like, "This person doesn't like the idea of me liking Barbie. Why should I bring it up?" And then there's that like closure. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so basically the hope is that it gives you an opportunity to be a nice, responsive person. So yeah, if you made fun of me, I would never mention how much I love Matchbox 20. I'll leave out all the, other embarrassing things about my life, but then also like legitimate things that I feel like we maybe could have bonded over. So, a lot of those studies are about providing opportunities for people to build intimacy. And, they range from kind of us joking about Barbie, for example, but then also like deeper things about kind of struggles you've had in life. And again, if you told me something like that, I'd be like, oh, that sounds like a really significant thing. How did it change your life? How did you process this? Are you still dealing with it? So all of this stuff is kind of the building blocks of like people getting to know each other. It also communicates that I like am a good listener and I want us to be friends. So there's a bunch of things about just disclosing and being responsive and a good listener that we've tried to coach people in how to do that, actually.
Wow,
And
that's interesting.
yeah, we've had some success. And a lot of it is kind of just being a responsive person and kind of active listening where,
Yeah.
you can tell that I'm absorbing the things you're saying.
Yeah. And so it
Yeah.
sounds like vulnerability is really important when it comes to building these close friendships. How can one differentiate between vulnerability and trauma dumping?
Yeah. 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 So there's studies on that as well. So, the vast majority of the time, disclosures are generally good, as long as they fall within like a certain range or sweet spot. So, me talking about Barbie for 45 minutes, like that's a relatively straight, that's not crazy, or
Yeah.
maybe it is crazy.
No, it's not.
Thanks. Thank you for that. That's very responsive of
I'll
you.
talk with you about Barbie for 45 minutes. But yeah, you were saying.
Yeah. So yeah, there's like a normal range of stuff we could talk about, like where you're from, the things you like, the things you don't like, the important values you hold dear. So the vast majority of the time, people tend to like each other after they disclose things, and we take turns disclosing. But then there's a sense in which really radical disclosures actually turn people off, and that's where the trauma dumping comes in, where if you kind of disclose something way too fast, and especially stuff that's, maybe not socially sanctioned or something that is a little bit just kind of too out there, we tend to really dislike those people. So which is a shame, because a lot of trauma dumping is them taking the opportunity to tell us, this really deep, informative thing about them. It's a core thing in their life. But, unfortunately, it's, it does backfire. So it is striking a balance. And unfortunately, the only way to kind of get a good sense of that is to try, have experience, see it go terribly wrong and then vow to never do it again?
In these investigations, have people ever tried trauma dumping and then not realized that they were doing it in the first place and still doing it over and over? And do they come back from it? Do they ever actually make friendships out of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the interesting thing is that a lot of times they'll be able to make friends because for some people, it does force some disclosure where, they are telling you something really deep about themselves. They skipped the small talk where you talk about the weather. There hasn't been as much work on kind of backtracking and then jumping back in. In terms of dumping anything, not even just trauma, just like talking too much. If you don't give other people a chance to disclose, then that really does disrupt it. So the key is that we take turns, that like you're able to kind of voice things about yourself and I'm able to listen. And that's why it works. The fact that one person isn't dumping the entire time. So that's actually more why it might not work. Not necessarily the content of the drama, although that could. It might be more of the dominating of the discussion when we met 5 minutes ago.
Right. And so if one party is actively disclosing and the other party is actively listening, but not taking the initiative to disclose, what can the first party do to make them feel a bit more comfortable?
It's tough when one person is kind of withholding and not being a part of it. It feels awkward. I feel like I told you all these things about me, and yet you're not reciprocating.
And at the same time, you don't want to pry or probe further into, uncomfortable territories, and you have no idea what's fine and what's not. So what advice do you have for that?
Yeah, so the key of why it works isn't really exactly the content of what you're saying all the time. A lot of it's just giving them opportunities to hopefully behave authentically, where they can be a responsive listener and you can be a listener too. So a lot of times centering their emotional experience about something. So asking what they think of something, or acknowledging maybe, hey, I've been talking a lot. What do you think about this? Or you draw in basically give them an opportunity or a prompt for them to talk about themselves. Because there are some people who find it really uncomfortable. But if you kind of explicitly say it, you're giving them license and space to say, no, I'm giving you space in this conversation to talk. And you have my undivided attention. So I am going to listen, process it, respond to it. Asking follow-up questions is also a really great opportunity. Things that they say, it shows that you're engaged. It shows that you're listening. One really great thing is that we also study how people respond, how they should and how they do respond to when people tell like good or bad news. And there's more effective ways to kind of respond when people tell you good stuff. Like a lot of it is trying to amplify the experience. Like, oh my God, you got this promotion. How did it feel? Like when they told you, like, what was your first thought? Like, what's the first thing you did when you heard? And like, I know you worked really hard for this, and So if you're able to kind of enhance the positive emotions of an experience, then you get them talking, you get them to re-experience that positivity. So there's a few different tricks you can use within a conversation to make it go better.
And also I suppose it's kind of similar to if they come to you with some form of news about themselves, and maybe they're not experiencing or they're not showing the emotion, and you express the emotion, the positive emotion towards them, and then they'll absorb that and feel happy for themselves, and they'll remember that you make them feel happy about themselves, and that's kind of like a reciprocation there, or some form of bonding there. So it doesn't always have to just be about talking. It can be about exchanging emotion as well. So now we're going into the practice/habits section, where we ask you some questions about applying the all of what you shared with us in our everyday lives. So what is a practice that you do to improve the quality of your relationship with your close friends?
Mhm. Yeah. So one thing I try to do is amplify positive experiences, like I just said. So for example, I had dinner with a friend last night, and he just got back from Italy.
Mhm.
So I had a million questions ready to go about
Yeah.
this experience. Um, and the truth is, like, he actually didn't love the trip, unfortunately. So
Aw.
there's a bunch of different. They had two small children, and that
Aw.
made things a little hard. And
Yeah. Traveling with
yeah,
babies is frustrating sometimes.
totally. And I knew that going in. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna let him kind of vent
Mhm.
about all the things that were the most annoying thing the
Mhm.
last. I think he went there for like 2 weeks or something, really kind of a long time. Um, so I knew this was coming, and I let him do it because I think he just needed a non-family member to talk
Yeah,
to about
100%.
this. So I don't,
Yeah.
he's not gonna complain to his 2-year-old daughter about how.
About how annoying she's been and what a
Yeah,
burden she's been.
that's strictly a Bill conversation.
Yeah.
Uh, and I do what you had said earlier, where I kind of listen with no judgment. I know that it's very stressful to travel with young kids, but so what I did then is I said, what was like your two favorite parts of the trip? So one thing is that it made him attend to the positive aspects of the experience. And I think that that's generally a good thing. So we study that as well, kind of emotional well-being and kind of where it comes from and how you can cultivate it. And a lot of it is kind of at least acknowledging like the positive parts of an experience. So I let him vent about that thing, and then he said he had like the most amazing meal in his life, and of course, there's so many questions like, oh, what'd you have, and like, what made it so great, and like, was it paired with wine? You know,
Oh,
was
I'm
it
getting
after a long
hungry
day?
thinking about this now.
Oh yeah, and like, do you have photos? Can you show me
Yeah.
photos so I can look at it? And um, you know, 30 minutes later, he had totally forgotten about kind of how annoying the most annoying parts of it were, and here we are, like, again, I tried to amplify it, get him to relive that experience. And you can do it with all sorts of things. That's just an example, but like, what are you really excited about this weekend? What was your favorite part about um your day? Or what are you looking forward to most? Why are you looking forward to that the most? Like, it seems like it's really important to you. Have you done something like that before? And a lot of it is sort of just trying to take a genuine interest in other people, and then trying to steer it to a positive place.
And are there any challenges that come with doing this practice?
Yeah. I mean, everything is not always positive. So sometimes it's impossible. But I think we've done studies where we've tried to examine like why friends stay together. So
Mhm.
I mean, it's a voluntary relationship where you choose to spend time together. Um, at any point, you could say you don't want to hang out with them, or you can fade away. You can kind of ghost and stop contacting each other. Most people don't do that with their families. And the one thing that, we measured all sorts of things about friendship dyads. We did this study where we followed friends and if they broke up. And really the only thing that kept them together, it wasn't, oh, you've been friends for 20 years and you feel trapped and you can't dump them. It's not that like you don't have any other friends or you don't have any other options. This is your only friend. The only thing that really kept people together was the fact that they liked each other.
Mhm.
So, the thing that kind of kept people together is like they enjoyed spending time together. And like, even in the absence of really positive things, delicious Italian meals or, work promotions, just having a listening ear can be a really pleasant experience too.
Mhm.
Well, I came and I complained to a friend and all they did was listen and support me and, validated my feelings. And, a lot of those discussions can be really negative, but the fact that you can leave that interaction feeling really positive because you had this friend that was really responsive. So, um, even in times of tragedy and sadness, there are opportunities to be a good friend.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I feel like every time I go through some kind of stressful situation or just a very distressing experience, talking to a friend about it, verbalizing all of it to someone who's listening can help me feel a bit better and help it feel more manageable as well. And also, it's not like my therapist is on call like 24/7, and it's really expensive. So having a close friend there to help be like a little sounding board, can be really, really helpful. Yeah. So now we're moving on to questions from the audience. Uh, First question is, how frequently should we express this vulnerability with our close friends? Is it advisable to do so constantly, or would it become burdensome on their part, having to continually hear about our life problems?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, the reason people stay together is because as friends, is because they like each other. And, things that jeopardize that are generally not good. So actually vulnerability and authenticity are good things. But also like another thing that shows that, you can build friendships between people is doing kind of new and exciting things that are filled with positive emotion. So they've done these studies too, where they have people go through like obstacle courses together, or they haven't quite had them like jump out of airplanes with parachutes and stuff, but they've had them do like physical exercise and things, and getting people outside their comfort zone a little bit gets them to kind of expand their sense of self, what they find is new and exciting. And then actually the fact that you and a friend kind of shared that together helps you become closer too. So variety is kind of a spice of friendship too. So it is not great to kind of constantly dump on your friend about all your vulnerabilities. And it's also a sense where maybe you lack a little self-awareness, where maybe you're not engaging with them as thoughtfully too. But yeah, so there's tons of other things you can do. Shared experiences, those are kind of the building blocks. So just spending time together is sometimes it's a necessary component. And then a lot of times it gives us opportunities to do other things other than kind of tell people of all the terrible things that are happening to us.
So on the other hand, as the friend acting as the supporter, how can we set healthy boundaries to ensure that we preserve our own mental well-being while still being a source of comfort for others? Is there even a way to do it all?
Yeah, well, I mean, friends, again, it's a bit of a blessing and a curse in the sense that, it's a voluntary relationship. So in one sense, it's really precarious, and, it could end at any moment, especially if you don't have a big shared history. Yeah, it's really difficult because friends will go through kind of long stretches of time when things just aren't going very well, right? Um, I think it's very, very hard to get friends out of those ruts. But the one thing within our power are things like being an active listener and trying to kind of be responsive. But it's important to kind of prioritize your own mental health as well. So, if you feel like a friend is really, really draining on you, one good thing you could do is suggest a bunch of opportunities for you to maybe grow as a friendship, kind of grow as friends in other ways too. So you could try something new. That's also really good at distracting people from their life troubles. So inadvertently, it might make them feel better too. So yeah, you got to set boundaries, but then one way you can kind of sneakily do it is by, choosing fun things to do.
Yeah. Would it be like, oh, I saw this exhibition going on this weekend. Would you like to check it out? Or like, oh, there's an escape room thing in the city. Do you want to go? There's this theme. And well, they're not going to trauma dump on you during the escape room, surely. So that would be fun, and that would take their mind off of things.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are great examples too about also like your shared attention is directed towards, escaping out of the room or attending to the artwork in the gallery, or Also like friend dates, like going on in activities with other friends is also like a good opportunity too, where, it dilutes the experience a little bit because it's not all about them. And actually it requires attention for them to kind of bond with other people too. So yeah, I know it sounds like a distraction or you're trying to cop out of it, but of them dumping on you. But, in reality, it's more like it gives them an opportunity to broaden their perspective where, oh, look, we looked at all this beautiful artwork, or we went on this wonderful hike, or we went on, this escape room that was, we really stunk at it. But that was part of the fun, is that we kind of didn't escape and we kind of fumbled it. So those are all kind of chances to be better friends.
Yeah, and in a way, it doesn't necessarily have to, like, you don't have to look at it as like copping out or trying to distract them or babysit them or something like that. It could just be as simple as like, oh, this is how I think my friend's going to feel better. Yeah, and that's how I think I can support them through it.
Yeah. If it comes from a place of kindness, that's good. Yeah, because they're your peer, right?
Yeah.
They're not a child.
Yeah, it's all about perspective, I guess. Yeah. So those are all the questions that we have for you today. Now we move on to the open mic, where you have about 10 minutes to talk about whatever that you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be related to the topic. It can be, though, if you want it to be. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, so this is why Barbie is the greatest movie of the last. We spend a lot of our time thinking about and researching friendship and relationships, how to make them better, why they go poorly. So we spend a lot of time and energy looking at that. But more broadly, I think our lab is shifting focus, and we're kind of being more secure, more kind of worried about if people have friends, or if they have enough friends, or if they have really meaningful friendships. So the questions today, a lot of them kind of centered around things people really struggle with. Like, I sometimes feel like a friendship is a burden. How do I set boundaries, or how do I kind of make my friend feel better? How can I make friends? How can I make really enriching friends? And I've always viewed it as this really great irony where we make friends our whole lives. When you think about when you're younger, there's no reason why you should have been friends with, other children. You're sort of just thrown in the same room, and it kind of just works. And that's a really fascinating thing about humans, is that we're a social species, and inevitably we're able to form relationships and meaningful ones, and we seek that out. And the vast majority of people want that in their life. And we have all this experience. We've been doing it our whole life. And then when people hit adulthood, they really struggle with it. And that's one thing that we just find really, really interesting, where you've had this experience, it's important, and yet you still struggle to do it. And that's a modern problem, when you compare polling from, say, even the last couple of years of the pandemic to people from the 90s or people from, the mid 2000s. The number of people who say they have a really close friend has really declined in the last 30 years. Go ahead.
No, I'm just curious. Have you guys found a reason for that? For why people find it more difficult to make close friends when they're adults?
No, so it's a mystery. So it's unequivocally happening where people want friends and they're struggling and they don't have as many. And I think that actually contributes to a lot of like mental health crises and the fact that you don't have a friend to talk to. So yeah, there's a bunch of different theories about it. So one theory is that like social institutions have kind of declined the last 30 years. So when I think of, say, people my parents' age, there was tons of like local bowling leagues and community centers and neighborhood events. And there was this general perception of trust around people that they were neighbors with. So some people think that that's one of the reasons, is that there's just not many opportunities to meet people. Within your lifetime, that's partially true. So one of the reasons why you made all those friends is because you went to school with them and you spent at least 8 hours a day with them. And then you become an adult and you just don't have that infrastructure. So that's really reasonable, right? Like, oh, you're just not around a ton of people. Like if you go to university, like you're around a bunch of people your age who all want to be friends. But yeah, when you're an adult, there's just fewer opportunities. So that's one explanation. Other people think that like it's uncertainty about the world. Like maybe you feel unsafe in some way and that restricts kind of your ability to make friends. Some people will blame technology. And I don't think that that's quite the reason. I think it's often used as a scapegoat for like all the problems in the world. But also technology has been really amazing at connecting people. Like we're talking now and we live on different continents.
Yeah. It also seems like almost always in these situations, it always seems like the obvious answer, because my parents' generation versus my generation, what's the main difference? Technology. And that's like the simplest answer. So how close or far are you guys to finding out, like to getting to the bottom of this?
Yeah. So I think we've been trying a few different strategies. So one thing is that when you remind people about, hey, you've done this before, and actually like other people also want to be your friend, that actually does a lot to kind of break down the barriers. So there are these studies where they'll survey people on subways and kind of public transport. And I don't know about you, but I like never speak to strangers in those situations.
I usually don't. I try not to.
Yeah, I stare at the ceiling or I'm listening to music. But and part of it is like I feel nervous about reaching out to other people, or me asking, hey, what book are you reading on when we're traveling, or making small talk. But again, there is this like empathy gap where tons of people want relationships and want friendships, but there is this barrier. So when you try to educate people about that, like, hey, there's a whole busload of people here that you could presumably have really meaningful connections with, or, when you're sitting waiting for something, or, hey, you've, keep seeing a coworker, but you haven't really ever had a deep conversation with them. Odds are they're thinking the same thing, where, they're, maybe I should say hi, or like literally learn anything about this person's life. So actually we're doing these really goofy studies where we just give people like a list of facts about how to make friends. And it's as if it's like the holy grail of truth, or that it's this amazing reveal. But in reality, a lot of it is just reminding people that they're perfectly capable of forming these relationships. And that's been helpful. And then the hope is that, some of those things are actionable. If you kind of just remind people that, hey, for thousands and thousands of years, humans have been able to do this and you can do it too. You just have to kind of broaden your perspective and try it. So having said that, it takes a ton of effort to make a really good friend.
It does. And it takes a lot of guts to step out of your comfort zone and try something new. Well, thank you so much, Bill, for answering all my questions today. It was great to learn about the importance of close friendships and how to be vulnerable. I learned so much. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
Yeah, we have a dedicated lab website. It's called chopiklab.com.
Chopiklab.com.
Yeah. And you can find all of our papers on there and the current stuff we're working on. And you can meet us and we can be your friend.
All right. Amazing. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll link chopiklabs.com in the show notes, and we'll catch you next episode. You've been listening to the Self-Improvement Atlas, the Personal Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. For more episodes like this from 10 different life management perspectives, search LMSL on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, so you can get updated on everything we have to offer. We have a wide range of topics readily available for you to check out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pe.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Marie Stella. Thanks for tuning in.